Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our June 3rd Tuesday at 3 webcast. My name is Alan Falcon. I'm CEO and Pragmatic Evangelist here at Cumulus Global, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day, busy week to join us here on what's hopefully a nice summery afternoon here in June. Our topic today, 5 cloud questions. We came up with this idea, really looking at, the 5 most common questions we get asked when we talk to small, mid-sized businesses and mid-market companies about their presence, their use, and their future in the cloud. And we thought it might be good just to, give you our stock answers and sort of our perspective on this. Some are pretty narrow in scope, some are pretty broad, so we hope it'll be informative and entertaining a little bit as well. Before we get into the meat of the webcast here this afternoon, as always, a couple of housekeeping tips. First off, this session is being recorded. And because of that, all of the voice lines are muted. That prevents any background noise and prevents us from accidentally recording anything you might say or be doing as you're watching the webcast as well, so it protects your privacy. We do make the recording available. It usually takes us a little less than 24 hours to get the video processed and up on our website. We'll send you an email when it's available. Please feel free to share it with any associates if you think they might find it of value. So, because those phone lines are muted and we can't hear you speak, if you have a question or a comment at any point in time during the session, along the right or top of your screen, there's some icons. One of them opens a questions window. That is the best way to reach me. It lets me know you've got a question and lets me track who's asked them and whether or not I've answered them before we end the session here today. Feel free to ask any questions while we're going through the presentation. We also have plenty of time for Q&A reserved at the end of the session. So again, thanks for joining us. It looks like a couple more people have just logged on, and we'll dive right into the content here today. So we look at our 5 questions. The first question, or I should say number 5 in popularity, the first one we'll talk about today is, will we save money? And to that, the answer is, generally yes, but it really depends. One of the big changes from a cost-saving standpoint when companies move from on-premise or even hosted services into cloud-based services is a change from CapEx to operating expenditure. And so rather than making a big purchase of hardware and software and maintenance services up front, you're paying for utilization as you go. And whereas CapEx tends to be one large expense, operating expenses with cloud tend to be a collection of many smaller expenses. But what we see is that because cloud services let you scale your services and have a lower upfront cost and have less supporting infrastructure, we generally see a savings. And this is hard dollar, or what we might call green dollar savings. And we see those services scaling a couple of ways. For services like Office 365 and G Suite, the services pretty much scale by the number of users. When you start looking at AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform, you can scale the services by resource utilization. But we have other services as well on that Azure, Google Cloud Platform size where you can scale by time, for example. So for example, we've got a client, we're moving their customized on-premise ERP system into a cloud server. In this instance, we're using Microsoft Azure. Instead of accessing on the local network, they're going to have a remote desktop window or a browser to access that remote desktop and do it fully within the cloud. Why? It gets rid of all the supporting infrastructure they need for on-premise servers and all that physical maintenance and hardware management and operating system management. It's a lower upfront cost than upgrading their servers, deploying, everything like that. They still have professional services because we're still installing their ERP system on on that system, and we're going to migrate the system and the data over. But they don't have the professional services involved in hardware setup and then configuring antivirus systems and configuring backups. All of that's sort of built into the cloud ecosystem. And when we get them up and running, we're actually going to scale services in a couple of ways. One, by resource utilization and better tuning their system. So we can go with smaller servers and use more of them when we need them. So for example, during the day, to support their workload, they'll probably load balance over 3 servers. Overnight, when maybe nobody's working or they just need it in case of a customer, urgent situation or something, we'll scale back to one server. And because of that, because we're paying for those resources when we need them and if we need them, we're able to lower their operating cost and their ongoing cost. And over the course of a 5-year server life cycle, they're definitely saving money. They're also saving money on the supporting infrastructure because by giving them access to their key business apps simply through a browser or a remote desktop client, we're lowering the hardware requirements they have, so the existing hardware will have a longer lifespan. And when it's time to replace that older hardware, their client devices, their desktops and laptops will be able to go with systems that are really designed for cloud endpoints, which have a much lower price point than a full-blown PC or a full-blown heavy laptop does. So the savings, those hard savings, come in a number of different spaces. But there's also the blue dollar savings, or the soft money, if you talk about that, we see when people move to cloud. Because you have increased collaboration and access to information, you have increased productivity. We see people running in cloud having better availability and reliability of their core systems. Yes, you could be prone to internet outages, but there's, internet bandwidth is relatively inexpensive right now. It's easy to have redundancy to make up for that. But those core things where most people have system failures with on-premise systems has to do with software configuration or hardware failure. And those are minimized, dramatically reduced when you move to the cloud because you're operating in a virtualized environment run by a professional data center staff who are monitoring that environment 24/7, 365, and will, without you even being aware, reallocate resources away from any problem they might be having in their system. We also see savings because of improved access. You don't need VPNs. You don't need, log me in or go to my PC to access your machine at the office. When you're out of the office, all you need is a direct internet connection. We know, that Microsoft and Google have, thousands of people working on security. Their environments are more secure than what we can do ourselves as small and mid-sized businesses. And the updates happen in a more automated fashion, so giving us, access to more current software. So there's some soft savings there as well. Our next question that we always get is, do I own my data? What happens when I put it in the cloud, and what does that mean for me with my data? And so to answer, do I own my data, the answer is yes. And very specifically, all of the cloud vendors we work with, the data ownership is clearly used. It's built into their legal agreements, and the vast majority of our cloud service providers have no direct access to your data whatsoever. The system itself, as your data goes in, it's encrypting it. They don't have the ability to decrypt it. They are simply the hosting spot. The only time they might have access to your data is if they're sharing your desktop or sharing your screen for a support service, in which case whatever's viewable on the screen is viewable to that support person. Additionally, you're not locked in, and that's certainly a concern of cloud vendors. And users of cloud services is, can I move my data out? And the better cloud services we work with provide means and assistance to remove your data from their service should you decide to switch to another service. So you own your own data. When we talk about that ownership, and we talk about control, I want to make clear that possession does not equal ownership and does not equal control. So you can own and control your data without that physical possession of having it on site. And yet we still get concerns from IT professionals. They'll look, for example, at Office 365 or G Suite, and they'll say, gee, this has so few administrative controls. When I manage my Exchange server, I've really spent time to optimize my outbound queuing priorities and algorithms and service so that mail gets delivered faster. They'll go into a whole litany of administrative controls that they have. Most of those controls they're talking about refer to resource management, as in, you don't care how big your outbound mail queues are unless those are competing for disk space and processor time with other resources on that Exchange server. When you move it to the cloud, into Office 365, you're running, your email service, which looks and feels like Exchange, is running in a scalable environment. So Microsoft is managing access to the resources, and you don't need to worry about that and have all of those controls. So there's fewer controls in place because there's less for you to manage that you need to. It's all being optimized algorithmically and by human intervention by the data center. Also, people start saying, well, hey, my group policies are going to be different. Yes, there are different methods of setting policies when you move into the cloud, but those controls are still there. And do you have less flexibility? In some instances you do. In some instances you have more flexibility. It really depends on the service. It also looks at what flexibility do you want or need. Oftentimes when we talk to IT administrators, the flexibility they're looking for is how they implement it on their given infrastructure. Well, when you move to the cloud, the infrastructure really isn't the issue anymore. It's the end user facing services and how are those configured that become the focal point and where you want your flexibility. So it's a bit of a new paradigm for many of IT providers, but you still have ownership and control of your information and how your ecosystem works. Even if the data is not in your physical possession, it's being stored up in a Microsoft or Google or some other data center. Question number 3 we get, is it secure? And even with all of the reports out there over and over again, we often have to answer this question. The answer is yes. Every year since 2012, Gartner's looked at the cloud computing industry, and every year they have the same conclusion. Cloud services are generally more secure than the on-premise systems they replace. And the reality is that cloud providers focus on security. Not only do they want to adhere and realize they need to adhere to security standards, they understand that their business depends on a successful security ecosystem and envelope. That if they can't keep your data secure, they're not going to have any customers and they're out of business. And so they make heavy investments. Microsoft estimates that they have about 16,000 employees worldwide working specifically on security for their cloud services. And that ranges, from the whole, really a culture they create for security where it's designed into the architecture of their data centers, of the hardware they're using, of the infrastructure with respect to networking and access and communications, how they deal with encryption and other ways of securing data at the data element level. All of that's built into the security architecture of the cloud providers. And it's sort of that culture that it's built into the architecture. It's how they design their software. It's how they test it. Security is a component. It's how they deploy it, how they manage their environment. And so when we look at provisioning cloud services and picking cloud services, we look for the certifications. We look for the ISO, the international standard certifications. We look for the U.S., the common security certifications in the U.S. beyond, beyond ISO. Is it FedRAMP compliant? Meaning, is it good enough for top secret U.S. government information? And then EU regulations as well if you're doing business with the EU, and those are changing actually currently with the GDPR standards coming in, and then there are industry standards as well, whether it's HIPAA for healthcare, which is U.S. regulatory, PCI DSS, which is the credit card industry, FISC, which is the financial services industry, all of the SOC, formerly the SAS 70 reports, which are promoted by the the AICPA, which is about organizational control of information, privacy, and security, all of those industries as well. So we look for solutions that meet these criteria and provide those ecosystems. Now that doesn't mean, hey, you say, hey, I'm going to go to Office 365 and they're HIPAA compliant, therefore I'm HIPAA compliant. The technology and how it's compliant is only one component. A good example is with G Suite. You can get Google to sign a BAA amendment that says they'll protect and take responsibility for your data with respect to HIPAA compliance. But in doing so, you agree to limit how certain ways of using the G Suite ecosystem, unless of course you provide other protections. So what Google says is, yes, we're HIPAA compliant, but you shouldn't put personal health information into Google Drive because users could accidentally share it publicly or share it too broadly and thereby create a violation. So Google says if you put PHI in Google Drive, then we're not liable if it leaks. That's your responsibility. And so they limit the scope of their BAA coverage. That said, we've got third-party tools that will monitor the Google Drive environment, identify PHI that might be shared inappropriately, strip those bad permissions off, and notify people that there's been a potential policy violation and corrective action's been taken. And so all of these things come into play. So yes, it is secure, and we can make it as secure as you need it to be for your business, and balance the level of security you need with usability and the user experience as well. Question number 2, will it integrate with the rest of my IT? This question is a little more complex because everyone's IT environment is different, but in general, again, the answer is yes, it will integrate. And it integrates in a couple of ways. First, I want to talk a little bit about cloud ecosystems. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Salesforce, and others have all created what we refer to as a cloud ecosystem. So when people talk to us about Google, I'll start there. They generally come to us about Google Apps, now known as G Suite, which that's great. It gives you your email, your calendars, your contacts, file storage. It gives you editors that you may or may not use. You can always integrate it with Microsoft Office. You've got sites, and you've got other tools in there in that ecosystem. That ecosystem has identity management that easily integrates with other systems. So it's very easy to integrate with a CRM system, an ERP system, a service desk system to run your help desk or your customer service function. There are now accounting systems that integrate in. There are workflow management, there are project management tools, all that work into all that integrate with G Suite. G Suite also integrates with its App Engine and its Google Cloud Platform, which give you broader capabilities to host services, applications, and build custom applications for your business. Similarly, the Microsoft Cloud has that same component. The cornerstone of their ecosystem for most small and mid-sized businesses is Office 365. As we'll get into a moment, and a little bit later in the session, Microsoft has a different philosophy, whereas Google is cloud first and pick your best of breed and integrate it together. Microsoft's cloud tends to promote a more integrated solution with more of the tools you would use in your business available from Microsoft and integrated with the suite. So Office 365 goes way beyond the Microsoft Office we know and love with, I think right now, close to a dozen additional applications and services that provide it, and of course, tight integration with Microsoft Azure, where you can have servers, applications, databases, and other systems running, again, with single identity management, and where the data is accessible and integratable between Office 365 and other aspects of the Microsoft Cloud. Amazon and Force.com, which is from Salesforce, do the same thing. They're creating an ecosystem of applications, systems, and services that are designed to integrate and work together, both from their own products and services and third-party products and services as well. So there's a lot of integration potential. And yes, some ecosystems integrate with your legacy applications a little better than others. We'll talk about that in a moment. The other aspect about integration is that hybrid is really the norm. People talk about public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. What we see is that hybrid is the norm. First of all, small and mid-sized businesses, and even the smaller mid-market companies, can't afford to make the private investment to do private cloud, where even if it's in a co-located data center, they own the hardware and the software and the systems, and they do the DevOps and manage the capacity. It's a lot of work. Most small and mid-sized companies, and even most smaller mid-market companies, are building what's private to them, but using public cloud resources. This is where Azure and AWS and Google Cloud Platform come in. This is where the software from IBM comes into play. And so really you're building a private ecosystem, but using public cloud services and resources. That's one aspect of the hybrid nature of cloud. The other is saying that not everything is going to be in cloud, at least not right away for most companies. Yep, we know that right now in the SMB space, about 15% of companies are 100% cloud. And by 2020, that's expected to approach 50%. Even so, that's a lot of people still running some of their information services and systems locally on-premise or on alternate hosted environments. So when we look at hybrid as the norm, we start looking at things such as integrated identity management. So people log into the environment once and they have access to their applications and data no matter where it resides. And that could be in the cloud, it could be on an on-premise server, it can also mean it's on their mobile device, and we can control that now with mobile device management. It means oftentimes creating virtual private networks between our private internal physical network in our facilities and the cloud services that we use as an additional layer of protection for accessing those public cloud services. Oftentimes we've got data sync and share of some sort, not just file sync and share of a file server up and down to the cloud, but data sync and share where you might have a database that's mirrored between on-premise and in the cloud or between multiple cloud services. The other thing we see with hybrid is that we gain location independence, right? That even though some of our information and systems might be running on-premise, the fact that we're integrated with the cloud gives us a measure of location independence where we can work pretty much anywhere we have an internet connection. And that can be a powerful aspect of hybrid integration. So we look at integration, I talk about Office 365. What you see in front of you is a recent, fairly recent chart of all of the components of the Office 365 suite, with one exception, that Dynamics 365 is an additional product that you pay additionally for. And this is enterprise level. Not all of these, most of these, but not all are included in the business level licensing for Office 365. But the point is that Microsoft has a number of features highlighted in red that are beyond the scope of a traditional Microsoft Office environment. So yep, you've got your mail, calendar, and people, which is contacts. You've got OneDrive, which is shared file services. We know that's their SharePoint, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. You also have these other applications that aren't part of that Office desktop or traditional Microsoft Windows Server environment. Yammer, a social media service private to your company or can be shared externally that lets people communicate and collaborate. You know, that's how your 20-somethings want to work. Planner, a simple project planning and task management tool for people who don't need the complexity of Microsoft Planner. Delve, artificial intelligence aided search that provides search results with much more context than a simple search of a drive in File Explorer. It brings up a sample of the document. It talks about ownership, last access, sample content, the type of document, who owns it, when it was last modified, all to view to put everything in context. Power BI, big data for small companies. Power BI lets you create workspaces and dashboards to analyze your business data, create really business intelligence about your organization that updates in real time. A video service, Sway, is a publishing tool for marketing that lets you tell stories in a dynamic way. Flow lets you create automation tasks and automate workflows within your organization. And Teams is a broader social communication tool that's not only that social stream of information, but can include files, workspaces, shared inboxes, things of that nature. So you've got a lot there that's not your typical Microsoft Office suite. Microsoft's strategy is to have all of these different tools that you might want or need integrated and available in the Office 365 suite. It's not saying you won't go to a third party like Slack or Hive for project management and social, social activity and socialized communications and team services. But Microsoft says, hey, we've got Yammer, we've got Teams, we've got Planner. You don't need those third-party tools. Google's strategy is a little bit different, right? You've got, when Google comes to integration, their products are lighter weight. They strive to have, 95% of the functionality that 80% of the people need. And the G Suite is kept itself fairly lean and mean in scope. So when we look at file services, absolutely, you've got Drive and you've got Google Docs for editors, and you can always integrate Microsoft Office very well. But when you start looking at conference and telephony, fine, in G Suite you've got Meet, formerly Hangouts, and Chat. But the telephony piece, isn't there. Now you can get integrated telephony as part of Office 365. In the G Suite environment, you're looking at a third-party integrated tool, whether it's Ring Central or the one we prefer, which is Dialpad. If you talk about sites and portals, Microsoft says, hey, we've got SharePoint, a powerful tool that has built-in workflow and capabilities and gives you the ability to do structured file management. G Suite, you have the ability to set up web portals, relatively limited in scope. If you need a structured file system, we're bringing in a tool like AO Docs. If you want more sophisticated portals, we're bringing in a tool like Overdrive from third parties. Similarly, Google has no project and task management, no CRM component. Those are going to come from tools like Hive or Trello, ProsperWorks for CRM, Salesforce, Sugar CRM, or others. And so Google's philosophy is a little bit different. It's a different level of integration. And the integration really assumes that you're cloud first and you're going to go pick out the best of breed or best fit for you and integrate it in from third parties. And that's, as I said, really reflected in their integration philosophies between Microsoft and Google. Office 365, comprehensive integration, because they have such a legacy premise, legacy presence on on-premise systems, very easy, very strong ability to integrate your cloud environment with your legacy systems, whether they're being hosted in Azure or they're remaining on premises. Microsoft's moving. Granted, it's a rapid evolution, extremely fast rapid evolution over revolution, but it is evolutionary as it goes forward. Google, when they brought out G Suite, really was focused on integrating best, says, hey, if you're going to integrate best of breed tools. We're not going to tell you what CRM to do. Go get Sugar, go get Salesforce, go get, ProsperWorks, go get the one that, go get one that's designed specifically for your industry, and we'll help you integrate, and we'll show you how to integrate it in. And we've got APIs, and your vendor can do it, and certainly you can tap into email, you can tap into calendar and contacts. You can do more than that with Drive. G Suite sort of assumes you're looking for a new line of business applications that you're going to be heading towards the cloud as you upgrade and rebuild or refresh and rebuy your business applications. And whereas Microsoft was rapid evolution from on-premise to cloud, G Suite, you really jump into the cloud and jump into that collaboration economy, if you will. So that brings us to the number one question we receive as we talk to small, mid-sized companies about cloud computing. That's which cloud, Microsoft or Google? And our answer to this is a resounding yes. It should be one or the other at this point. Now we know that AWS and Cisco are working on collaboration suites and broadening their appeal beyond, from the moving from the infrastructure and platform service as a service industry into the productivity suite environment. And that's fine. They'll get there. We'll evaluate it when they arrive. But when we look at Office 365 or Google and their cloud environments, the reason we say our answer is yes is because moving to cloud is now a matter of when and how. It's no longer a matter of if. The writing is on the wall. Vendors are, with their cloud solutions, that's where they're putting the features, that's where they're putting the capabilities, that's where they're putting their support and their resources, and that's where they want their customers to move. And that's where it's becoming most cost-effective to operate as well. So we look at which cloud. Now we've done entire hour-long webcasts on which cloud, and we've done overview webcasts as part of our Coffee and Cloud series. You can feel free to watch a recording of that session as well. But what we identify when we talk about which cloud, we talk about 5 factors that come into play. One is, what are your business goals, objectives, challenges, and priorities? And we always start with this one because depending on what your business goals are, certain cloud services might be better suited to help you achieve what you're trying to do. That is because they're different operating environments and they have different philosophies and therefore different strengths and weaknesses. And if you can start with your business goals and objectives, the challenges you're trying to overcome and the priorities of what you want to achieve, we can emphasize cloud services whose strengths match what you're trying to do. The second aspect that comes into play is culture of your organization, right? In that, cloud computing does present a shift in the way we work. We like to say that there's 4 generations of workers in the workplace: face-to-face meetings, conference call, email, and chat, right? So you think about, who in your company has which preferred mode of communication personally, and you want to tie them all together, right? And so when we look at the differences between Office 365 and G Suite, for example, Office 365 still brings forward a lot of that legacy infrastructure. Microsoft file servers were designed to mimic physical filing cabinets. even in the terminology, right? So you don't have cabinets, but well, originally Microsoft, you talked about file cabinets, but then they became drives, and you have folders and subfolders, right? And you have this hierarchy, very much the way we physically file things. Google's take was different. Yes, you've got folders and subfolders in Google Drive, but you've got an entirely different search mechanism that makes where you put the information less important than the fact that if you know what you're looking for, or you have keywords, you can do a full context search and you can find it. And so it's not necessarily as important that you have that organized structure. But if your culture is more peer-to-peer, if it's a little flatter in nature, if it's maybe on the more youthful side, to put it delicately, G Suite may be a better solution because the way information is stored and shared fits with that culture. If your culture is more hierarchical, if you tend to have organizational boundaries and the information needs to live within those boundaries, even if you're looking to increase collaboration, or from an operating process standpoint, you're fairly structured in how you service your customers and how you operate your business, then the Microsoft suite and sort of that legacy environment is there. Now in Office 365, you have OneDrive, which is peer-to-peer, personally controlled storage, and you have that flexibility, but it's in SharePoint then that you get that native ability to set up libraries of information, manage the hierarchy, control access more centrally. The third factor is the line of business applications. Again, here, where are you and where are you headed? If you're aggressively moving into the cloud and you expect to replace your remaining on-premise systems with cloud-based solutions, G Suite is designed to integrate cloud-based solutions. They focus on working with third-party vendors. They limit their own functionality so that you can pick, what they consider best of breed or you consider best fit cloud applications to pull in. If you've got a legacy environment, maybe it's an ERP system or a financial system that's been customized where you can't just flip the switch and move into the SaaS or the cloud version. Even if you're going to be moving that into, let's say, Microsoft Azure as a hosting environment or onto Google Cloud Platform as a cloud-based hosted environment, look at those applications. What do they run on? How do they run? How do they use them? What's the back end? We have companies that say, I really like G Suite, from a collaboration standpoint of documents, but I've got 3 business systems and they all run on SQL Server. Well, when you look at which cloud you're moving into, if you move into Office 365, you've got Power BI, which connects to SQL Server. You have a new embedded reporting system that also lets you build intelligent interactive dashboards with drill down and lets you do business intelligence and analytics on a scale without having to invest in a third-party system. There's an advantage there if that is going to serve your business goals, objectives, overcome your challenges, and help you with your priorities. The other factor that comes into play is how are you working remote and what do you need for mobility? Both Office 365 and G Suite are great with mobile and remote workers. The strategy and how they're managed, however, are somewhat different, worth looking into to make sure it matches your style. And finally, what do you need for security compliance? Because each product has security and has compliance features and options. How they deploy it is different, and when we need to bring in a third-party tool to complete the picture also differs between the 2 environments. So good understanding of what your requirements there, we can use that and we can help figure out which direction might be best for you. So when we look at the Office 365 value proposition, and we always look at what we call E squared, S squared, right? Is it enabling the company? How does it empower the organization or the individual user? What solutions is it providing and what success does it bring? Office 365's value proposition around enabling is broad new capabilities and new ways to work and communicate. It's somewhat familiar to what people have done in the past, but it's expanded. So yes, you still need to train and help people explore and utilize those new capabilities, but it's stepping stones forward. It's not a huge leap or a giant paradigm shift. It's empowering people because you're providing them with better tools that make them more efficient and let them become more efficient. You're also providing a variety of tools. There's more than one way to accomplish things in Office 365, and you can pick the tool or the subset of tools that best meets those needs. From a solution standpoint, incredibly better access to information, not just files and files in your file server or file service, but understanding who's working on what, when, why, and how, when people are available, how they prefer to communicate, and putting things in context as you access that information. And this, from a success standpoint, it's highly integrated. Again, Microsoft puts more in the platform. They like that, it is a comprehensive integration, and it's easy to use, in part because it's familiar. The G Suite value proposition is a little different. It's about new capabilities. It's about the collaboration economy. The empowerment comes from the agility of the tools. They're lightweight. They're not as feature heavy, if you will, because 80% of the people don't need those features, so why put them in? Let's perform well. Let's focus on the collaboration, on teamwork, on sharing of information, on helping the work process move more effectively, and let's give people the power to tweak things in a way in those tools to keep them agile and responsive to how they want to work. The solutions it's an integration of best of breed. I've mentioned this a couple of times. Google says, hey, where Microsoft says, if you're running Office 365 and you want CRM, we've got Dynamics 365, it's got CRM, it's ERP, we've got financial services, it all can tie in. Google says, hey, look, you need a service desk, go out and do Zendesk, or go out and do Salesforce in one of the Force.com based service desks. Pick ProsperWorks for your CRM system. You've got those options. So Google is a lightweight ecosystem that's designed for integration with other cloud services and building a broader cloud ecosystem. And its really success is that it's easy to use. It's easy to share. It's easy to work. As organizations realize they don't necessarily need the heaviness of Office on the desktop for the majority of their workers, if not all of their workers, the online editors become very fast and efficient. And so it's a different value proposition which fits differently within organizations. So when making a choice, again, different philosophies, different strategies, different ways of implementing the same types of services. It's a broad perspective in picking the right choice. I'll let you know that right now about 20% of our cloud migrations are going from G Suite to Office 365 or from Office 365 to G Suite. From people who moved to the cloud early and over time have realized that the direction they're going in the cloud, the other ecosystem will be a better fit, and the other productivity suite will be a better core to their ecosystem than the one they started on. And that's fine. Obviously, we'd like to avoid you having to make that change down the line. That's why we look at beyond just the technology and beyond the features and functions into how it fits with those 5 factors across your organization. So having looked at those 5 questions, I want to provide you with some additional resources here. I'll leave this slide up so even in the recording it's visible for a while. And if you have any questions, you'll have my contact and our company contact information shortly. For general infos and ideas about what's happening in cloud computing and the industry in general, we do blog. We've sort of been on hiatus. We're going to be restructuring the blog and relaunching in July. So cumulusglobal.com/blog is where you find our blog. We also publish 2 newsletters, or I should say really 2 newspapers, if you will. We aggregate from about 3 dozen sources of information about cloud computing that we vet and respect. You can have those headlines delivered to your inbox daily or weekly. They come out at roughly 10 a.m. every day for the daily, and Fridays at 10 for the weekly. The URLs are there on the screen, daily or weekly.cumulusglobal.com. We also do have a monthly newsletter. We're happy to have you subscribe to it. There we have features, thought pieces, ideas, and information. We'll highlight some cool tools that we've seen or that we're working with. Oftentimes we can highlight special promotions that our vendors are making available to help you if you're thinking of moving forward. It could be a financial incentive to do so sooner rather than later. If you're at the point where you're thinking about your cloud, whether you're in the cloud or not, and picking which cloud, Office 365 and the Google Cloud and ecosystem, or Office 365 and the Microsoft Cloud ecosystem, or G Suite and the Google Cloud ecosystem, we've got some specific resources for you. One, we have an ebook that goes into a little more detail about the 5 factors I've discussed here today. The ebook's Picking Your Productivity Cloud. It's available in the library. on our website as part of the Resource Center. We will also do a free assessment. We have a questionnaire that if you complete, generally takes us about 3 days to analyze the results and pull together a report. We will provide you with an assessment report with recommendations and justifications for those recommendations on which way we think you should go based on the information you provide. Be aware, this is not a little simple marketing survey. This is a comprehensive questionnaire. It will take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes to complete. We take that data, we do analysis on it, we map it to best practice models. We listen and take, the more information you provide, particularly in the free text questions, the better job we can do understanding your environment and putting together some preliminary recommendations. Along with that report with those recommendations, we will get on the phone. We'll spend 30 to 60 minutes with you and your team on the phone at no charge, sort of to review what we learned, what we believe we know about your environment now, and therefore, why we're recommending what we are, answer any questions, discuss any additional issues that you have. And again, it's a service we regularly charge for, but as an attendee of this webcast, we're happy to do that for you in complimentary, no-fee fashion. So with that said, I do want to open up our Q&A session as well. If you don't have a question right now, or you can't think of one, or if you're watching the recording and you have a question, you can contact us here at Cumulus Global, info@cumulusglobal.com. Our toll-free number and the number for international dialing is up there on the screen as well. Myself, I'm Alan Falcon, afalcon@cumulusglobal.com. As it is on the screen, you have my direct line there as well. I will tell you off the bat, I am better at answering emails than I am at listening to voicemail messages. So it's better to send me an email, but you've got my contact as well. At this point, I want to thank everyone for joining us, particularly those on the recording. I'm going to go off and pause the recording and come back and answer any questions that we have from the live session. So for those on the recording, thanks for taking time for the recording. Please contact us with any questions you may have, or for any further information, or if you need us to resend those links for those resources. Thanks for joining us, and have a great week.